Now we're being joined by Victor Kipiani, Chairman, Geocase think tank. Good morning, sir. Delighted to have you with us.
Good morning. Pleasure to be with you.
All right, sir. So we're looking at these protests sparking all across Georgia due to the foreign influence bill. And of course, the president said she is going to veto it. However, they seem to also not have the parliamentary majority to be able to completely block the bill. Is it going to go through?
Actually, yes, the law has already been vetoed and sent back to the parliament. Indeed, Georgian Dream has enough votes in the parliament to overcome the veto, although the date for the hearing to overcome the veto or to accept the veto, it could happen either way, but most likely Georgian Dream would be voting against the presidential veto. That date has not been set up yet.
Right. So we've heard voices from various EU politicians, including Emmanuel Macron or Olaf Scholz, saying that they're worried by what's happening in Georgia. Georgia started its path, right, towards the EU in December of 2023. If I'm not mistaken, you received the candidate status. So what happens now? Can the EU do something, or are these politicians just, voicing their concern? How much is it about Georgia also, and how much is it about growing Russian influence in the region, of course?
Yes, we've got a very robust and very explicit and straightforward statement by President Macron and Chancellor Scholz yesterday. But to forget for a second about the European politicians, we Georgians are worried even more. And that's not surprising. Indeed, back December last year, we've got the candidate status. But now, as it goes on the ground, and as we're expecting a decision, the next decision by the European Union and this year to open, hopefully, we still keep that hope to open accession talks with Georgia, the law which we're discussing, and not just the law itself, but various other developments, especially the rhetorics of Georgian Dream, which indicates a possible change in the Georgian foreign policy objectives, could block the European integration of Georgia. Of course, not for an indefinite period of time, but for a significant period of time. So there is our discussions on the Georgian side at this point around the law and the recent developments. Not surprising, there are very intensive debates among European politicians, and not just among European politicians. The Georgian case has been very much on the radars of the United States and of the Congress. So if the process goes in the way as it goes so far, we definitely have to expect some backlash by the United States in the first place, and then by the European Union. But perhaps the dynamics on the American side and the European side would be different because of differences in bureaucracies and how the internal dynamics work in the United States and within the European Union.
And speaking of dynamics, we'd also observed a very interesting situation a few days back where the foreign ministers of some Baltic countries joined in on the protest, joining in the march, especially Estonia, Latvia. Their governmental personnel were actually marching on the streets with these protesters. What do these signify?
Frankly speaking, they've been quite divisive assessments on those four foreign ministers or three foreign ministers joining the protesters on Rustaveli Avenue. Of course, it's a very arguable point, and I would also would not be getting into details, and I'm not myself, quite certain, whether that form, was right or wrong in terms of diplomacy and certain protocol. But that not as important. Important and more significant is the unified voice of our European partners, that they stand next to the Georgia's European path. And this is even more important now because as we speak, I'm always repeating that at this juncture of time, there are two pressure points to change the development from the negative side to the positive side. This is a pressure from inside, and this is a pressure from outside. Of course, that pressure could reflect in different forms, and those forms could vary from the political statements to individual sanctions, which are not less likely these days. But in overall, the common message by our partners, which have been standing next to Georgia for the last 3 decades, in terms of upholding Georgian sovereignty, territorial integrity, its institutional and societal capacity building, has never been important as much as it is today. So from that angle, in that context, having that voice by the European foreign ministers is very critical for Georgian public to hear on the ground.
Right. So as Benjamin mentioned, foreign ministers from Estonia, Lithuania, and Iceland were in Georgia just a few days ago, and of course, there's this huge international uproar about what's happening. But in reality, how could this law really hinder the activities of these NGOs, and how will that translate into the changing of the political landscape? Perhaps if there is no such law in place, some of these things could still be done because, according to Freedom House, Georgia is only partially free, and I guess the Georgian Dream Party is quite, influential in sort of, if you will.
There is a long response to your question, but due to the time constraints, I would focus on a short response. Of course, there are various provisions in the law which are very much arguable, very much controversial. But let's stick to the name itself, the foreign influence. And the law starts with a very ominous preamble, to be in service of foreign influence. That connotation is already divisive. It's already polarizing. It does not help in terms of national unity and consolidation. Labeling someone being in the service of foreign influence, by default, could entail a meaning that someone is acting against the national interests and state interests. So this is the bone of contention. And that's something which is fundamentally and in principle unacceptable. This is not especially about the technicalities, in as much as about standards and as about certain threshold in the values. And the European EU has stated on numerous occasions that this draft law, because of its nature, because of its spirit, is not up to the standards of the European Union. It's not up to the expectations. It's not to the policy spirit of European Union. And if we Georgians would love to become a member of that family, definitely we should pay due respect to those statements and to those appeals.
So just one short question at the very end. What caused this sort of pivot, this change in Georgia's government approach to certain issues? Why this law has sort of surfaced now, if as recently as in December of 2023, Georgia was well on its way towards the EU?
It's $1 million question, frankly speaking, and there are various explanations starting from sort of, an attempt to consolidate the basic supporters and the voters, and leaning into the dimension of the conspiracy. At this point in time, of course, there is not a single and plausible explanation, but to my view and to my opinion, the explanation could be found in the state of domestic affairs in combination with geopolitical implications. So that being said, I think, that would be the best lead for us and the best direction to dig into the rationale behind of introducing that draft law.
Victor Kipiani, Chairman, Geocase think tank, thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Pleasure.